All right, welcome everybody. Is anybody here for the first time tonight? Welcome. Welcome back everybody. Good to see you. Welcome to anybody joining us for the first time on Zoom. I like to start class by giving you a topic and asking you to speak to each other for a few minutes in service of Against the Stream being a place where you build some community, you get to know each other. I'm going to talk about compassion tonight and some of the challenges and what sometimes is referred to as the near enemy, where it sort of feels like compassion, but it's creating suffering for you. In short, compassion alleviates suffering, doesn't cause it. There's a phenomena that they talk about in like service work or psychological or medical fields where they talk about compassion fatigue. If it's fatiguing you, it's not compassion. It's something that's masquerading as compassion, or we're not. Compassion itself is a soothing experience. It's not. It doesn't fatigue you at all. So I'm going to talk about that tonight. So for your small groups, where is it that you find that you're wanting to be compassionate, you're feeling compassionate, but it's actually difficult, where it's creating suffering for you? It's creating, difficulty or suffering or stress, rather than it being a soothing or an alleviating experience. Compassion, as it's has, I want to say, supposed to be or has the potential to be. Certainly the way that the Buddha talked about compassion is an antidote to suffering and not something that would ever cause suffering or fatigue or stress in our lives. It's actually the solution. So I'm going to talk about some of what the Buddha taught about that and how we can develop it and uncover it and experience it, and also the humility to be like, and we're not always doing it correctly. We're a bit of attachment or control or judgment or fear mixed in there that creates fatigue, creates suffering. So where's your places in your life in the small groups? Talk to each other about, like, I have compassion here, but it actually overwhelms me, or it fatigues me, or I get real attached and I go in with compassionate intentions, but I end up angry or afraid or attached in some way or another. From a Theravadan Buddhist perspective, the definition, compassion by definition, has no attachment in it, zero clinging, zero need for the pain to go away. It's just the experience of caring without any controlling or clinging or needing to manipulate or push away the pain. It's just the wise response to the reality of pain in our lives and in the world. And so small groups on compassion and fatigue, and then we'll meditate and then we'll talk more about it. Say a couple things before we meditate. The word that from early Buddhism, from the Pali language, that we translate to compassion is karuna, K-A-R-U-N-A, karuna. And karuna, I'm told, translates more directly as the heart's natural movement in response to pain. I heard one kind of scholar say it actually means the quivering of the heart, a natural sort of feeling moved, and that it's a soothing quivering, a soothing movement. It's not painful. It's the response to pain. It's the wisest possible response to pain, but it's feeling it. It's feeling moved by it, not feeling and so the key here, when we're talking about compassion is only in response to pain. So in life, in the world, there's As they say in Chinese Buddhism, there's 10,000 sorrows. They're all worthy of compassion. 10,000 forms of pain and suffering and ignorance and confusion. And that's where we try to focus and uncover and connect with compassion to the sorrow in our lives and in the world, each other's lives, the pain, the difficulties. But then there's also 10,000 joys in existence. And the joy, the pleasure, the fun, the happiness, the beauty is no compassion needed. That's a whole nother practice, non-attached appreciation, not our topic tonight, but we're going to talk about the suffering tonight. But it's not always suffering, and it's not all suffering. We're going to talk about compassion tonight. But hopefully your life isn't just 10,000 difficulties. Hopefully there's also a balanced amount of pleasantries in your life. But Buddhism really does focus on what is getting in the way of our peace, of our happiness, at our being contented. And our relationship to pain is one of the core ways we create unnecessary unhappiness in our lives. And I say we create it, but it's probably more accurate to say the human condition creates it. The mind, the survival instinct, the body doesn't naturally have compassion. Compassion is something that we have to develop, that we have to uncover. That quivering of the heart is a potential in us. Compassion is a potential in all of us, and meditation gives us access to it. The trained heart, the wise heart, isn't something that we're just born with, or else the world would be a very different place than it is. But it's pretty clear to look at our own lives and look at the world and see the lack of compassion. And it's not because people are evil, it's because compassion is a rare quality. And it's something, it's an enlightened quality. And that's part of what we do in meditation. One of the goals, one of the outcomes. I don't know if this is true or not because it's my projection, it's my subjective experience, that my experience has been that compassion coming from the inside, learning to care about my own pain, taught me to care about other people's pain in a much deeper way, in a much more authentic way. Learning to be in pain was my pathway to learning to have some compassion and for others in a deeper, more sincere way. Not just that I theoretically care about you, but I know what it's like to be in pain. And I've learned to sit with my pain, and now I can sit with your pain. But when I couldn't sit with my pain, everybody else's pain was a burden and something that I needed to do something about and avoid and suppress and become fatigued when I was trying to control other people's pain because I didn't know how to be with my own. And I feel like one of the core benefits of Buddhist meditation, and maybe the whole path, but in particular, the learning to sit still and learning to turn towards our pain, is that we become more intimate, more friendly, more present, more tolerant, more merciful, and ultimately more compassionate towards our own pain. And then we have so much more space to be with other people's pain without needing it to go away. As when we stop needing our pain to go away and see the thankfully impermanent nature of it, it arises, it sustains, it passes. We see that, that's true for everyone. I don't need to try to manipulate or control or meet with aversion other people's pain, as we learn that from the inside out. And as I say, I know that's not everybody's experience. Some people are more naturally externally compassionate towards others and have a hard time caring about themselves. That was not my experience. My experience was I hated my pain and I hated your pain and I hated just about everything. As I learned to not hate myself and not hate my pain so much, I learned to care about you and care about the world in a much deeper way. So we'll sit, and part of the sitting is learning to sit here and be uncomfortable. And knowing that when you get uncomfortable in sitting meditation, it's an opportunity to deepen tolerance, to deepen compassion, to turn towards and be with the ache in your knee, or the loud mind, or the sorrow in your heart. All of that is part of the sitting still practice. So find a posture that's sustainable. Hopefully, at least it begins comfortable, and then it gets uncomfortable at some point, probably. Allowing your eyes to close and taking a moment to soften any unnecessary tension your body's holding. Release with each exhale. Soften your belly, your jaw, your shoulders. Often when our body is tense, it's because we're resisting, meeting with aversion, suppressing. We soften to open to turn towards, to allow. Soften your belly. Soften your heart. Establishing mindfulness, the practice of non-judgmental present time awareness. Be mindful of your body, the body posture sitting here. We're mindful of the sensations that the breath creates, the sensations in the body which are experienced as pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. As we focus on compassion tonight, bring attention in particular to that which is unpleasant, unpleasant sensations, unpleasant emotions or thoughts that draw our attention. And for the first few minutes, stay focused in the body, first foundation of mindfulness. When the attention gets drawn into thinking, disengage, come back to your body sitting here. Feel the contact with the chair, the cushion, feel the breath. You can use the breath to breathe into that which is unpleasant. As you exhale, soften around anything that's unpleasant rather than tightening or resisting. With each exhale, soften into the sensations in your knees, in your butt, your shoulders. Rather than keeping a narrow focus on the breath and body, allow your mindfulness to be inclusive of your whole being, your emotions, your thoughts, the sense doors of hearing and seeing, smelling and tasting. Non-judgmental, present time, compassionate awareness towards anything that's unpleasant, unpleasant thoughts, worries, doubts, fears, unpleasant sounds, sensations. Breathe into the heart. If you can sense the movement, the quivering, the compassionate heart, the kind heart, the part of you that cares deeply and sincerely. Tibetan Buddhists have a practice called Tonglen where they say breathe in the pain of the world. Breathe out compassion towards all beings. Coordinating this compassion practice with the breath can be quite beneficial, useful. And you can just do it starting at home, here in this mind, breathing in the painful thoughts into the heart, the painful emotions and sensations. And breathing out the intention to be tolerant and kind, merciful and compassionate towards our own pain. And extending this compassion to those sitting next to you, in front of you, behind you, the people in your breakout rooms or small groups, the Sangha here gathered, breathing in the pain that we all share, pain of the human condition, of having a mind that is not filled with wisdom all of the time, a body subject to sickness and aging and death and all of the pains that go along with the process. Breathing out compassion towards each other, extending karuna, opening the heart. And extending it in all directions to those that are easy to love, our loved ones, our benefactors, to our friends and colleagues, associates, community members, the neighborhood, the city. The intention of extending compassion, allowing the heart to be undefended, open, towards all living beings, including our enemies, including the confused, ignorant, having compassion for the most unwise on the planet, the most confused. Until we include all living beings, all sentient beings, with the intention of mercy, compassion, open-heartedness, The Buddha was quite clear that his teachings were the path to ending suffering, the suffering that could be ended. And also quite clear that the end of suffering was not the end of pain. And that we have to understand that we can't conflate pain and suffering, and that usually we do. We think, well, if I'm in pain, I'm suffering about it. Pain sucks, so I hate it and I suffer about it. And, this is where it's a subtle teaching, but it's very important when talking about compassion and talking about the world through a Buddhist wisdom lens, that there's no freedom from pain available as long as you're incarnated, as long as you have a body and a mind and a heart. You will experience pain. It's our nervous system, it's our psyche, it's what we are doing here. It's what we're experiencing here. Some of it. As I said, there's all kinds of pleasure and joy, but there's also an inevitable, unavoidable level of pain and unpleasantness that just goes along with existence. So the first step is acceptance, is understanding, is wisdom. Knowing that pain is just part of the process. It doesn't have to be such a problem if we can see that it's just nature. It's the Dharma. We talk about the Dharma usually as the teachings, but a core part of the teachings, what the Dharma also means is the way things are, reality as it is. And reality as it is unfucking pleasant some of the time. Some of the time. And, if we're honest, if you assess your life one day at a time, day to day, there's probably not a single day that goes by without some unpleasantness. Probably even hard to have many minutes or, without some unpleasant smell or taste or sight or thought coming through your mind or sensation in your body. It's hard to be comfortable in these bodies. Even when like sitting in meditation, we learn to be uncomfortable, but like, what's the most comfortable bed you've ever been in? And how it's like just that, whatever it was, feathered down comforter or memory foam, or, like you can get your body comfortable for how long before being in that posture. It's like, this is the most comfortable ever, and I still have to roll over because I'm uncomfortable. After a few minutes or however long. So that acceptance of discomfort, of unpleasantness, of pain seems to be, it's pretty, saying it even sounds kind of stupid to say it. But often we're suffering because we're not in acceptance that, of course, life's unpleasant sometimes. Of course it is. We think it shouldn't be. We try to control it and manipulate it and avoid it, medicate it. A lot of us drank ourselves into alcoholism, trying to create pleasure and avoid pain, or drug addiction, or of like, I just want to only feel pleasantness. I don't want to feel painfulness, painful thoughts, emotions, sensations. I want to avoid it. And once we start to accept that pain is unavoidable, then what are we going to do about it? If I can't avoid it, how am I going to deal with it? How am I going to, and this is so central to the Buddha's understanding, the Buddha's teaching, and the answer is compassion. But how do we become compassionate? And compassion is not a knowledge. Maybe it is. Like, first we have to understand and come to know that compassion is, what compassion is, and how to access it and experience it. And then there's the path from, I feel like on some level or another, the default setting for humans, our survival instinct, this is just like evolutionary, biological, instinctual drive, is aversion to pain. On some level. Now, where that is set is different for different people. We all have some aversion. Some people seem more naturally tolerant to pain than others. Some are incredibly averse to all unpleasantness. Some people are kind of like, I'm pretty tolerant. I don't know if this will get me in trouble or not, but I'm told I shouldn't do gender stuff, but I'll do it anyways. That women in general are more tolerant of pain than men. Childbirth, maybe it's part of the kind of in there. In general, that's not always true. We can find exceptions to all generalities, and gender is probably not smart for me to talk about, but I did it. Women are tougher than men. Aversion as our default, and then wanting to get over to non-aversion. And the journey, how do I get from this default habitual reaction of aversion? Aversion seems to be the habitual reaction of humanity in response to pain. And so, okay, I don't want to live there anymore. There's all kinds of problems with the aversion. It makes it worse. The definition of suffering is when we meet pain with aversion, we create this extra layer. Now, in Buddhism, the promise is you can remove that extra layer. You can get free from suffering, not free from pain, but with a wise relationship to pain, no more suffering about it. The end of suffering about being uncomfortable, learning to just be uncomfortable. The end of suffering about the pain in the world and ignorance and oppression, and a level of acceptance that's not complacency, but that's a compassionate willingness to act. But it comes from, on that, the first level is, this is the world we live in. It's a world of pain. It's a world of 10,000 sorrows. It's a world of ignorance and oppression, and rather than suffering at the world, seeing it, yep, this is it. Here it is. Here we are. Here we are in this world of greed and hatred and delusion. Here we are in this world of sexism and racism and homophobia and all forms of human power struggle, ignorance. Compassion for the reality of the world we live in. But also, because it's painful, aversion. I hate it. I hate living in this world of ignorance. I don't have compassion. Because I have compassion, I hate the world. Because I have compassion for the oppressed, for the ignorance, for those suffer in pain in the world, I then meet it with aversion, with hatred, I hate hatred. What sense does that make? I am meeting what I hate about the world with hatred, rather than friendliness, understanding, compassion, an engaged response, a habitual reaction, aversion. Feel like it would be interesting, these days, I still think I'm so, I guess it's analog, old school. I still think in terms of dials, but dials don't really exist anymore, except for on my old cars. But it's more kind of like, digital the battery on your phone, you know, like, or whatever it is. But I think of, you know, like a compassion meter. And that on some level or another, we all start at zero, like uncharged. And that it is through turning towards our pain, through doing practices like we did tonight. May I meet my pain with mercy and compassion. May I sit with it. May I breathe into it. May I meet your pain with mercy and compassion, sending it out into all beings, trying to open the heart. That it starts to charge, starts to fill, starts to move the dial from aversion to... When I reflect on my own meditation practice in the early years, I hated meditation. And I hated being uncomfortable. And I would sit here and I'd be uncomfortable. And I would just bear it. I was like, this fucking sucks. My back hurts, my knees hurt, my mind is extra loud if I don't have any distraction. But I can see that those early years of just tolerance, of just sitting there and not getting up, and I'm gentle, like we only sit for about 30 minutes here. The meditation groups that I went to back in the 80s, early 90s, 45-minute silent sit. And I'm just 19, just going like, what the fuck am I doing here? But I can see that it taught me how to sit still and be in pain. And it started to move the dial from, I can't do this, to it's okay to be uncomfortable. Learning to sit still with my pain. And that over the years, months and days and months and years of doing that, it radically shifted my relationship, as it does for all of us that take on the practice, to a more, less aversive, or it's like aversion that's making it worse, to a little bit less aversion, more tolerance with some aversion, to sitting in... I like to talk about, most of you have heard me talk about this, the term mercy, which is not a very Buddhist word, and I don't think there's anywhere in Buddhism that there's any... I've never heard a Buddhist word translated as mercy. Seems like a little bit more Western emotional word, and often used in Western religions about God. God is merciful. And so at some point I looked up the definition. What does mercy mean? Because I like the sound of it. And the definition is when you're in a position where you have the power to cause harm, choosing not to cause harm is an act of mercy. Anytime you're in a position of power, choosing not to abuse your power, to not cause harm when you have the ability to cause harm, just that renunciation of making it worse, of causing harm, is an act of mercy. Now, in this Buddhist concept, there is pain. And as we learn to be tolerant and change our relationship to pain, we start to see, actually, I can either hate my pain and make it worse. I can meet this pain with aversion. I can tighten my stomach and my jaw and my heart, and I can close it, and I can get mad at my pain, and I can create all kinds of suffering. I have the power to really fuck my life up. You always have the power to create suffering for yourself. We're powerful people. You've got a lot of ability to burn it down. You can be unskillful towards others. You can be unskillful to yourself. You have a lot of influence. You have a lot of power. Anytime you choose not to use to be aversive, it's an act of mercy. Anytime we choose to not make it worse, it's an act of mercy. It's not quite compassion yet. Mercy isn't necessarily soothing. Mercy is, I want to use the term harm reduction. It's like, you could cause harm, but you're reducing the amount of harm you cause to yourself when you're merciful. And I feel like when I came to the path, I was making my life worse and worse. Getting sober was an act of mercy. That was something. Stopping taking drugs and drinking was definitely something, because that, a whole nother story, but the drugs and alcohol that at one point were the solution and were alleviating pain in my life started to cause more and more pain and suffering in my life. And so that getting sober as an act of mercy, for those of you who aren't alcoholics or addicts, might not relate to that as much, but I'm sure you can understand that act of mercy. And then learning to sit still and turn towards the pain, and trying to develop loving kindness and compassion as an act of mercy. But it wasn't compassion. I would probably use the word compassion because that's what my teachers were saying, but I couldn't feel my heart moving in response. I couldn't feel friendly or warm or really caring about my pain, but I learned to not make it worse. Less and less aversion, more and more acceptance. And that, I feel like that's a sort of like, on the meter, that's like halfway. If you're not making it worse, that's like halfway to the fully charged compassionate heart. That renunciation of aversion and accepting pain, even if you don't quite care about it yet. Maybe there's not a full, warm, heart quivering response, but you're just willing to tolerate it. And then, continuing these practices and seeing that there's something that gets uncovered in here. As we learn to sit, as we learn to turn towards it, it feels like, one teacher used the image with me that I like. He said, it feels like there was like a heavy wool blanket or curtain kind of covering the heart, and that mindfulness, turning towards, investigating, non-judgmental awareness, pulled back that cover. And that the heart's true nature is of compassion. The undefended, the uncovered, the unarmored heart has not just mercy, but has a friendliness, has a caring, has a loving nature. And it takes however long it takes. I can look back, however long you've been practicing, I can look back on my practice in decades now and be like, in that first decade of meditation practice, I made some progress towards mercy. And in the second decade, I got more and more tastes of compassion. And I'm into my fourth decade now, and I've got more work to go. I'm not compassionate at all. I can't do it all of the time. But I now know what it is and what it feels like, and have access to it more often than not. But sometimes not. But sometimes not at all. Sometimes I know compassion is the right thing to do, and I'm just mad. I'm just hurt. I'm just making it worse. I'm just resentful. I don't have, I'm not even 37 years into it. I can't do it all the time. But more often than not, I can. And that was learned through the cushion. Through turning towards. Now, I know I said I was going to talk about compassion fatigue. And I know that this has been sort of a pop psychology, Western topic in psychology and maybe other helping professions. But as I said before, my Buddhist understanding of compassion, which is there's no attachment. There's no need for the pain to go away. It's just tending to it. It's just caring about it. So when we were becoming fatigued, when we're becoming burned out, overwhelmed, it's because there's some attachment there. It's because there's some clinging. It's because there's some aversion to it. It's not true compassion. And of course it's not, because we're not enlightened yet. Maybe it's part of that process, around mercy and going to compassion, that we're going to overestimate our capacity or our ability because we're not fully non-attached, compassionate beings yet. And so there's going to be some burnout. There's going to be some fatigue. I've definitely seen it in my own life where I have had a tendency to overcommit myself and at one point I was even working with some teachers and a therapist about what I was calling this sort of like bodhisattva syndrome. Almost like bodhisattva is the more northern Buddhist concept, Tibetan and Mahayana concept, that you're going to alleviate all of the suffering in the world, that you'll work tirelessly for the end of suffering for the benefit of all living beings. And at some point, I sort of took that on in my own life of like, I'm going to be a bodhisattva. I'm going to alleviate the suffering for all living, not only for myself, but for all living beings. And then I saw like, oh, wow, I'm fucking really carrying, what an ego trip that is. I'm really carrying a lot on I'm going to save all living beings. I'm going to postpone my happiness until everyone's happy. Sounds a little bit like codependency. A lot of attachment in that. Now, ultimately, in the Tibetan Buddhist bodhisattva perspective, they have a good argument for it. But I think I was, kind of misunderstanding it and misapplying it into where there was actually quite a bit of attachment, quite a bit of craving, quite a bit of self. I had way too much self. So to have truly no attachment to the end of suffering, there also has to be very little or no attachment to the I, me, mine, the self-centeredness of the human condition. So understanding anatta, understanding the emptiness of the self, in order to really be that kind of compassionate being that is unburdened by the pain in the world, but cares about it deeply. That difference between caring and being burdened or overwhelmed or burned out. Sometimes when I'm talking about relationships, I talk about the difference between attachment and non-attachment, and I use my hands to say, kind of clinging is kind of digging your nails in and trying to control. And then non-attachment is the connection to what's happening without trying to control it. And then we misunderstand sometimes and we overcompensate. We say, attachment is painful, so avoidance. The detachment is avoidance. And that the goal is non-attachment. And not just in our relationships, but in our relationship to pain. Rather than trying to control it or overgoing to trying to avoid it, trying to be present with a connection to our pain. An embodied feeling tending to our pain, as well as being connected to the pain of others and not being too averse and not being too controlling, not leaning in too much or leaning back too much, but being connected and being holding space. I kind of hate that term, holding space, but there's something to it. Being present for, being present with. Without needing it to be different than it is. My decades of 12-step conditioning, I often come back to the serenity prayer. And that question, and in Buddhism, it's a question of equanimity and the balance between equanimity and compassion of, is this a situation where I just need to accept it? Accepting the things I can't change. Can I change this? Is there anything that I can do? It's a good question. And the second part, which is having the courage to change the things that I can. Is there something that I can do for you that will alleviate your suffering? Is there something that can I be of service? Kindness, generosity, presence. Is there something that having the courage to show up and be with somebody when they're in grief, when they're in sorrow, when they're in pain, as an act of compassion? without the delusion that says, I need to somehow take this pain away from you, take your grief away from you, take your sorrow away from you, rather than just being with you in it. Kind of the most wise thing we can usually do. But the question of courage, is there something I can do? Is this something that is to be accepted? Or is there courage to change the things that I can? Can I do something? In the Buddha's teaching on the heart, wise heart, the undefended heart, the open heart, that curtain that gets pulled back that Bhikkhu Analio was talking to me about. He said, the natural hearts, and this is the Buddha's teaching, qualities are loving kindness for all living beings, compassion for all living beings, non-attached appreciation, sympathetic joy for all living beings. And the balancing factor is the wisdom of equanimity, the equanimous heart that has compassion, but also understands, in the way that the traditional Buddhist phrase is understanding everyone has their own karma. And my happiness or unhappiness depends on how I act, how I respond, how I relate to my pain, to my pleasure, to my mind, to my body. Your happiness or unhappiness depends on how you respond to your thoughts, your sensations, your emotions. We all have our own personal responsibility for our own happiness. We all have our own karma. All beings are heir, inheritors of their actions. And no matter how much we love someone, we can't change them. No matter how much compassion we have for somebody else's pain, we can't take their pain away. And we can't make them have compassion for their own pain. As a parent, this is it's one thing as an adult relationships to kind of get this about each other, but in parenting, it's quite challenging. Because you're like, well, how do I teach my kids to not make their lives worse? And, even though I was a teenage junkie, I did grow up with, some Buddhist parents who actually did. They taught me about softening to pain. They taught me about this stuff. I ignored it until I bottomed out and then kind of came back around to it. But we can teach our children some of these core skills. I'm kind of trying to, my own way with my kids, modeling it, teaching it, not lecturing, not pushing it, but saying, pain is inevitable, impermanence is reality. Attachment makes it worse. Non-attachment helps. Compassion helps. This is how we navigate the pain of existence and the joy of existence. But no matter how much you teach somebody and give them that knowledge, the wisdom of it has to come from inside and come from disciplined practice. Because we can read, as most of us have, you read the books, you get the philosophy, it sounds great. Non-attachment, good idea. Compassion, great idea. That's beautiful idea. But it's just an idea until we embody it, until we digest it, until we pull that curtain back that is blocking the compassionate heart. And I could be wrong, but I think that meditation is the only way to really do it. Some form of deep introspective turning towards. And so Buddhist meditation has great techniques to do that. I'm sure there's other techniques and other traditions and other ways to turn towards. Psychotherapy is one of the ways that we get in the room and we have the conversation about our pain and it helps us turn towards it. Recovery groups where we kind of get together and we talk about our joys and sorrows, and that oral tradition is helpful. Sanghas where we get together and we talk about it, we discuss it. But the silent stillness practice of really turning towards it, learning to sit in it. I can't think of anything that works that as well as meditation works. So really touch reality without avoiding it in any way. Really touch reality, really see it clearly. I don't know exactly where this phrase comes from. It might have been my father's something lecture he gave or something, but I keep coming back to this thought of how to keep our hearts open in hell. And that's part of our practice when it comes to compassion. Because when life is painful, it feels like hell. And how do I keep my heart open? How do I stay compassionate in the midst of hell? When life is pleasant and everything's going well, heart's wide open because it feels good. But as soon as it's painful, the heart wants to close, wants to defend, wants to protect itself. And so much of our practice is, can I keep my heart open? Can I remain undefended, even when life is incredibly painful, even when the world is looking like such a mess? It's always looked like a mess, but right now, particularly looks like a mess. How do I keep my heart open, stay compassionate, stay loving, stay kind, rather than regressing to, I hate them for hating others. I hate the haters. There's a simple teaching from the Buddha where he says, similar thing is happening in his culture, and he says, hatred will never cease by more hatred. By love alone does hatred cease. That it's only love and compassion and kindness that's ever going to end the suffering that hatred creates. So compassion as an act of love for ourselves, for others. Maybe the last thing I'll say about the fatigue thing is that we do have to have humility and see clearly our capacity and kind of have a heart open to all living beings, but good boundaries, if that makes sense. And even like when we're talking about forgiveness, forgiveness means letting your enemies, those who've hurt you, back into your heart. But it doesn't necessarily letting them back into your home ever again. So likewise with the compassionate heart, all beings are worthy of compassion. All beings are not worthy of your attention, of your personal space, of your, right? So having boundaries around, yes, I have compassion. I'm trying to have compassion for everyone, everywhere, but also I'm going to reserve my time and energy for the wise people that I'm, connected with. And I'm not going to overwhelm myself or overburden myself or burn myself out. Just talking to a recovery friend earlier today about balancing how many people we sponsor or mentor, or this friend that I was talking to is also a therapist, and kind of balancing the client load and the service work and the relationship. And having the humility to be like, actually, I have a capacity, and I can't go beyond that capacity, or I don't show up well in my relationship, or I don't show up well for the people that I'm trying to mentor or sponsor or counsel. And that humility that says, this is what a balanced life looks like for me. And not that it's a set thing, but that it's a goal that we're all often trying to, recalibrate, finding the balance, and as the pendulum goes up, I'm being a little too slack. I could take on a little bit more service, or I could have a few more clients, or up too much. I've overcompensated, now I'm too busy. I don't have enough time for my practice or my relationships or some fun stuff in life. When I was in graduate school in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was working at San Quentin. I was volunteering for a harm reduction coalition. I was working at Spirit Rock Meditation Center. I was in grad school. I was writing a book. And my teacher at the time said, "What are you doing for fun?" And I was doing lots of retreats. Every time I got a chance, if I had any time off of school, I was going on a retreat. He's like, don't forget to enjoy yourself. All of this practice is good, but do you have a hobby? Is there anything that how do you play? And I couldn't really answer it. I was like, I go to slam dancing sometimes, like stage dive on the weekends. I don't really have a hobby. I like music. I like motorcycles. That's when I started playing poker. He's like, "That's not what I was talking about." Time for questions, comments, clarifications before we end. Any thoughts about compassion? I'm sure I didn't give you an exhaustive teaching on compassion, but some thoughts from me about compassion. Eric, please.
Is there anywhere in Buddhism, or does the Buddha teach in any way that it's okay temporarily to avoid suffering in a healthy way? So I think about it, me being a drug addict, alcoholic, right? And the way I used to avoid suffering was by, drinking and using, yeah? Now I'll be in some pain, and I know it's not going to go away, right? And I'll sit, and it's still not going to go away, So I need to go surf or something like that, you know what I mean? And that puts me in a different state of mind temporarily, and then I can come back, and generally I'll have a different view of it. I think because my body is shifted energetically. So I'm just curious if there's any healthy way to avoid suffering temporarily.
Mm-hmm. Could you hear the question at home? Yeah. So last week, you were here last week, and I went through that whole sutta, that whole scripture. And there's some places in teachings like that where he is saying when he was talking about money, he was like, take some of the money and do something that you enjoy. And but my sense of the Buddha is that he didn't really, because he was a kind of a lifelong renunciate. When he took on the spiritual path, he took it on in an extreme way. And so he doesn't often, in my opinion, have a lot of good advice for householders and the kind of action sports and, surfing and kind of indulging in healthy activities. There are some places where he's saying yeah, of course, enjoy the pleasant things in life. Just don't get attached to them. As far as an avoidance technique, I don't know of any. And what actually came to mind, the avoidance technique that the Buddha encouraged and utilized in his own life is concentration meditation. And you've probably heard me say before, the Buddha had chronic pain and several debilitating injuries towards the end of his life. And there's a couple places in the teachings where he says, the only time that I'm not in pain, he said, I'm in chronic pain. And the only time I get some relief from the physical pain is when I go into a deep concentrated meditation. He said, so I intentionally utilize concentration states, the jhanas, in order to give myself a break from the physical pain that I live with. So I could take that and be like, yeah, he said it's okay to have a distraction and enjoy yourself. He's doing it in a meditation because he's got that power, right? He can just tune into concentration and his body dissolves and he's like, no more pain. Whew, this is great. We don't have that, but when you're in the water, you get that break from the busyness of life and the stresses when you're on that wave, or you're skateboarding or snowboarding, or when you're in the midst of that, what they call the zone, right? We get that experience that's probably very similar to a jhana state where everything else dissolves and you're just fully present in that pleasant adrenaline, in our case, adrenaline fueled activity. But I can't think of anywhere in the teachings where he says yeah, go have fun.
But then also you mentioned sitting on the cushion and meditating should not be used as a form of escapism,
Right.
though, right?
Yeah. Well, that the escapism of it, and so this is where, when we're talking about concentration, the Buddha warned about using concentration as a bypass, as an avoidance, that it won't get you to liberation. But then after he was in liberation through mindfulness, he said, I do use concentration as a intentional avoidance of my physical pain at times, because I can. But I didn't, using it as an avoidance would have never gotten me to liberation. But now that I have compassion for all living beings and am completely present with my own pain, at times it's nice to get a break from it. And because I can get a break from it, I do. Since I live with a chronic pain. Yeah. Maybe enough for tonight. Last one, Ron.
Your initial question about areas that we have difficulty with compassion. You also, you're saying about like your timeline of your path through your recovery and decades. I've noticed what feels like maybe bypass year in, year out. Like I'm going into like year 6. You know, so like renunciation, you know, focusing on all these things, and then just like sometimes just like wake up and like, oh my God, there's this huge blind spot that I just, after all this time, and there's like a level of like frustration of like, how could I miss that after all this time? I should know all this shit by now. I don't know if that's like an area that, like with compassion, like you're asking what we have trouble with, but like it's so much time into self-forgiveness, and you know, and then there's like this whole huge gap. Like, wow, I've been in this for 6 years now. How can I mean, it was helpful when you said like now, towards the end of the first decade, you just started getting some like, you know, traction with compassion. But is that like a phenomenon within mindfulness, or?
It's like the judging mind. It can be like the Buddhist superego. You know, it's like where we then use Buddhism to judge ourselves. Like, I should know, I should be more compassionate than I am. I'm really a failure at this thing. I'm a loser. And we kind of judge ourselves based on what we know we should know. I shouldn't still have resentments. I shouldn't still have cravings. I shouldn't still, like, why? Because that's what the books point to, this perfection ideal. 6 years, 30 something years as an addict, 6 years in recovery. I'm still a baby. And having that humility of, and that 10-year thing, I say it a lot. I got it from His Holiness the Dalai Lama when asked, how do we, what's the fast way? How do we get this thing quickly? And he said, there's no quickness, there's no quick path. Commit to your path. Only check in on your progress once every decade or so. After you've been doing it for 10 years, look back at your life and say, am I suffering less than I used to? Or even at 6 years, you can give yourself a hard time about like, oh, I stuck in this thing that I'm surprised by. I thought I was over this. But if you really reflect, you'll be like, but it's a lot better than when I was in year 1. I'm not done with my practice. I'm not liberated. I still get hooked. I still get stuck. I still get resentful or self-centered or whatever it is, reactive. But there's progress that's been made. And when you look back at 6 years or at 10 years, you'll be like, I'm not perfect, but it's getting better. And at 20 years, it's getting better. And the Dalai Lama said this and then said he does that in his life. And he says, my first... I think he was like 64 or something when he said this, which is maybe 20 years ago now. And he said, I went to the monastery when I was like 4. And from 4 to 14, I was just sort of learning this stuff. But that first decade, I learned some stuff. And then, 14 to 24, I started to really experience some of the benefits of living in that Buddhist practice. And then in my 30s, more, in my 40s, and my 50s, he said, now I'm in my 60s when he said this. And he says, I don't have compassion all of the time, but much better. It's getting much better over the decades of trying to develop it and access it. And it's a beautiful, humble model to look at really long-term, slow, gradual awakening. I'll leave it there for tonight since we're out of time. Sorry if I didn't get to your thoughts. Sebastian's not here tonight, but Dennis will be at the desk. If you donations, class is done by donation. Donations best by Venmo or cash, or go to the website and if you want to do a credit card, you can do it directly through the website. We don't have a credit card reader tonight. Thank you for your generosity. We can't exist without your generosity. Nobody's paying for this but us. Everything's done on a donation basis in order to support the center. Please be generous. Off the Cushion has an announcement.
Yes, Off the Cushion, it's our inner Sangha social action group. We had an amazing Saturday thanks to Nancy. Over 30 of us showed up at the Westside Food Bank. We packed over 1,100 Thanksgiving boxes for families. It was like phenomenal. We broke records. Thank you all who came out. Thank you everyone who contributed.
We got real competitive about it. Like we're going to do service, but we're going to do it faster than those other fucking groups.
Everyone had so much fun. My heart was so full just watching all these people, like just people who didn't know each other meeting for the first time, and really built a lot of community. So it was really special event. I'm sure we'll do it probably in first quarter next year. This Wednesday will be our last in-person meeting of the year. We do a monthly in-person meeting just to figure out what we're focusing on. Yeah, it'll be in this room at 8 p.m. on Wednesday night. We'll probably start setting some goals for next year. If you have some ideas on ways we can get involved in the community, we'd love to hear them. And I have a WhatsApp group if you want to join that. Come talk to me after. I'll add you to that. That's how you kind of stay informed about everything. We are doing a food drive. We have a box that's almost full, and then we have another one we'll set up. We'll probably work on this until Christmas, and then we'll take that to the Westside Food Bank, which is great. They're doing a 5K this weekend. I know some of you talked about going. Nancy will know more about that. You can talk to her after.
Yeah, just real quickly, it's Sunday at 12, and it's at Ocean View Park. And if you belong to the group, where I'll give you that link, it's at 12 o'clock, it's free. If you want to join, you can contribute $25 if you actually want to get a number and participate in the walk or the run. And it's a lot of family kind of booths and events, so bring your family.
And my son and I were planning to go, and maybe some more of my family, my crew. But if you'd like to join, we could do it as a group. We could do a kind of against the stream walking meditation, which just means walking together mindfully. But I'm going to be there. We'll put it in the WhatsApp group and do this walk for the food bank on Sunday. And it's just a fun activity. And my son was like, he wants to run it, but it's not a run. It's not a 5K run. It's a walk. So we're going to walk it with a group. So you're all invited to do that with us if you'd like.
Thanks again, everybody. You guys are so awesome. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I've got a day long in December. I think it's the 13th or 14th. I'll talk to you more about that. I'm in town for one more week. I'll be here next Monday, and then I'm going to Sri Lanka for 3 weeks. We're doing an Against the Stream pilgrimage. You will still have class every Monday while I'm gone. You have a sub, Ward Robinson, who teaches a group on the east side, colleague, student of mine. Will be teaching for all 3 Mondays that I'm gone. So still come and support the Sangha and support each other and him. He's a good teacher. So we'll leave it there for tonight. May any goodness that comes from our practice increase the compassion on this planet. May each one of us become as free as possible. And together, may we create a positive change on this planet. See you next week.